I've got a few things to go over today. I think the most important is C11. I don't feel like a lot of people really have a grasp on what it will do for independent creators, especially from Canada, and how the algorithm is going to punish them for doing so. From my understanding, what the bill is going to do is it's going to artificially push Canadian content to Canadian viewers. But the problem with that is it's actually going to more so feature the legacy content and not so much the independent creator. And also the problem with that is on YouTube, if you have artificially inflated views, let's say you're paying for views, or you've got an external site that you're pushing content to get extra views, the algorithm will recognize that as it's already inflated or artificially inflated. There's actually a separate part of the algorithm. And since you're in that artificially inflated section, YouTube doesn't push you in the regular algorithm. Would I be correct in assuming that?
You have a really good understanding of the negative consequences of what would happen in terms of YouTube. The thing is with the bill, it's so broad. It covers not only YouTube, but TikTok and Netflix and any streaming platform like Disney Plus, or technically it also includes anybody who were to offer videos on any platform whatsoever. So if I were to just make a new website called umamivideos.com, I would also be falling under the regulation of Bill C11, as in the bill it's technically referred to as an online undertaking. And so I would be so if I were to have my own website, I'd have to do all these obligations to the CRTC. Basically, a certain percentage has to be French, has subtitles, and all this kind of burdensome stuff that an individual creator would have to do. But just in terms of what most people are criticizing on YouTube, basically the Canadian government has brought forward this bill to promote Canadian content, which the qualifications for being Canadian content, CanCon, are sort of narrow, but it's based on the IP ownership, based on whether or not you received funding from corporate sponsors, a few other different things. So there's a lot of things going on right now. Basically, what they're trying to do is push CanCon content within the feeds algorithmically. For someone like me who's a Canadian creator, technically my videos could be qualified as CanCon, so long as I don't do sponsorships in my videos. And that would mean that I would have to register with the CRTC, which is this government body. I'd have to fill out forms about who's in the video, who's Canadian, who owns the ownership of every individual YouTube video that I post, even TikTok videos. If I just were to film some random thing, I'd have to do that. It's, as the bill is written, that's how it would have to go right now. And of course, the government's saying, oh, you don't have to do this. It's not going to be like that at all, and trust us. But if I were to take the bill on face value, it's essentially all there, and all these concerns that we're bringing forth are they're being ignored by the people who basically wrote the bill. And they're being, there's a lot of pushback against the bill by some members of the Senate and Parliament, but it seems to be that because and the NDP have this kind of coalition. It's like an unofficial coalition. They basically just shoved it through to the Senate. And so I was able to speak at the Senate and even at the parliamentary hearings as a witness against Bill C11 to kind of explain my case. Along with many other YouTubers out there as well. Morgan Fortier, who has this huge YouTube channel in Canada that does a lot of animation as well, but it's more geared towards like children and nursery rhymes and that sort of thing. I think it's actually the largest channel in Canada. Also JJ McCullough, who's kind of more like a political / kind of social / pop culture kind of critique channel, I guess, or a discussion channel. So he was also there.
Well, I've actually watched most of those through, and the one thing they can't seem to comprehend in Parliament is that it's going to push you into the artificially inflated part of the algorithm. Well, how's this going to hurt you? We're pushing your content. How's this going to hurt you? And I just keep saying it's the same thing as if you buy views. That's not going to help your channel because YouTube's like, oh, an external source is pushing this. Therefore, we need to stay away from it because we don't know who all's involved. We can't trust them. Even if it's a big brand name, there's no different algorithm for that. It all goes into the same section. And the problem is it's so rooted into the algorithm, you basically have to do a complete overhaul. And YouTube's not going to do that because they would
Yeah.
have to go through and make a separate one. Well, this one's for CanCon, this one's for paid views, this one's from hacking, this one's from Twitter, Discord, you name it. And they would have to redo everything, and they're not going to do that.
It's like this. Like, say for instance, my videos are CanCon. That means I'm going to have my videos pushed to Canadians that are less relevant. So like basically people who aren't interested in animations aren't going to get my videos, and that's going to hurt me as a creator because you're going to see my audience retention drop off. You're going to see less viewer interest because I'm getting like all this inflated views from people who are less interested. But that also affects me on the international stage because if I'm getting all these extra views within Canada, they're going to look at that and be like, well, we have to detract his viewership from the international audience, like the Americans and stuff. Otherwise, if I would just have a net positive more viewers than like any other YouTuber.
It wouldn't be fair.
It wouldn't be fair, exactly. So I would lose Americans, viewers who are more relevant, like my own subscribers, basically, and I would get more less relevant Canadian viewers. And it could be as much as 30%, which is the numbers that has been thrown around from these hearings. In terms of like radio in Canada, it's 30%. 30% of our radio stations have to broadcast like Canadian content. And so I'm assuming they're probably going to try to aim for that as well in terms of like algorithmic feeds.
The one thing I wasn't aware of is the fact that you basically have to be networked in with basically a governing body to be able to, or at least a regulatory network of sorts, to be able to get the promotions. And then you have to have all of your sponsorships basically filtered through them.
Well, so one of the things that was brought up most recently is the fact that sponsored videos or videos that have like ads in them or whatever don't qualify as CanCon. And so I don't personally do it myself, but I'm sure a lot of YouTubers out there, they do sponsorships. And so basically that disqualifies them as being CanCon, even though everything else about their videos is CanCon. And so what that would mean is if they're not qualified as CanCon, they're going to be like pushed to the bottom within their own country because there's going to be these CBC videos, CBC Gem videos, or CTV News, right? That's CanCon, that gets pushed to the top of everyone's algorithm feed. And with their own country, because they're not considered CanCon, then they're pushed to the bottom. So basically, there's many different like angles at how this bill is very bad for basically anyone who's not like a huge media corporation.
That would be a double jab. It would be you're at the bottom of the CanCon algorithm, and YouTube's like, oh, they're in the CanCon algorithm, so push them to the bottom of the international algorithm. It's completely destroying Canadian creators.
There's another aspect to it too, where basically it just tells like YouTube and TikTok, these social media streaming platforms, to just give money. They just have to like give money to fund these productions that are owned by Bell Media and CTV News and all that sort of thing. Like it's just like basically a cash grab. And it's essentially just corporate versus corporate at the end of the day. I'm on the side defending YouTube and TikTok, which I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. I shouldn't have to be doing that. I shouldn't be defending corporations. But I'm picking a side because they're my partners, you know? And they give me money. I'm able to post my videos on there. I make ad revenue off of them. And then you have CBC and you have CTV and you have Bell Media, and they're basically just saying, hey, all that money you guys are making, I want some of it for no reason other than the fact that you took our audiences, basically, is what their argument is. We lost our foothold as the provider of cultural relevance, so just give us your money. That's really all they're saying. It's kind of ridiculous.
They think they own the audience. They're like,
Yes.
well, give us our audience back. They don't realize the audience, well, adapted and has new interests. They've evolved
Exactly.
as time has gone on, as media has gone on, as things like streaming and videos become more prominent, and they can't keep up. And they don't understand. They're like, well, that's already ours, so give them back. And they're not putting the individual first.
I mean, one of the questions I was asked at the Senate was, what is your opinion on whether or not did YouTube destroy Bell Media's audience or whatever? Did they do anything nefarious to like take their... It's like, no, people just moved on because honestly, I don't think most people watch like mainstream television anymore. It's just full of ads and the programs are just boring, really bad. And I mean, with a few exceptions, obviously, but like most people don't watch television for the fact that, you know, there's better stuff on YouTube now. Like the world has moved on, honestly.
Yeah.
And Yeah, they're living in the past basically, and they refuse to adapt to the new technology. So,
What do you think the chances are that C11 will be passed?
so right now the bill has passed Parliament. It's passed. It's in the Senate being discussed. Basically, I think they've finished most of the witness hearings. Like they've interviewed me and a bunch of other companies, TikTok, Disney, and YouTube, and all these cultural media groups that are for Bill C11 because they work with the legacy media companies in Canada. So now I don't really know how long it will be to hear like the latest news on it, but it's kind of like at the last like 1%. You know, if you were to like imagine a loading bar, we're at like 99%. And so it could get passed, and if it does get passed, then I don't know what to say. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Most likely, I feel like it's going to be amended. So some of my concerns, particularly with the social media posts, will have an exclusion so that your social media feed posts won't be regulated. However, there's still other aspects of the bill that are anti-consumer and just wrong in my opinion, like the fact that for some reason YouTube has to just pay into these programs even though they don't get to own the ownerships of them or whatsoever. Or one of the other things is, from a consumer perspective, you're probably like, as a Canadian, you're probably going to get less options for streaming services because smaller streaming services such as BritBox, whatever, aren't going to offer 30% Canadian content when 100% of their catalog is British, and their whole branding's around it. For instance, there's a lot of smaller niche streaming companies that it doesn't make sense for them. The Canadian market's too small, so they'll just be like, we'll just leave. And so we'll have less options as a Canadian for just like entertainment and that sort of thing.
I mean, it's going to be a domino effect. It's basically what this is going to lead to is the segregation of content from separate nations. There'll be Canadian content, American content, you know, it'll be completely divided, and that's the last thing we need. Now, I kind of have two different angles for this question. One, if it does pass, how quickly do you think the other nations will follow? Do you think the other nations will follow? And then two, if it is not passed or amended or whatever, do you think it's inevitable that the other countries will follow suit?
I think that if it's not passed, I think the world is probably going to be focusing on other things for now, I would hope. I mean, like in Canada, we got this crazy inflation stuff. It's just kind of embarrassing that we're even focusing on your YouTube algorithm, you know, when we have people struggling to pay their bills. I think like 1 in 5 Canadians rely on the food bank or something like that. And don't quote me on that, but I guess it's a very high number, and people are like very like they're pressed with their mortgages these days, and the Canadian and then the liberals are just like focused so in on this like social media regulation. It's my hope is that you know, it doesn't get passed, and most other nations will not follow suit with their own similar sort of thing. However, I think something similar was tried in Australia, and I'm not really sure how it worked out. I think it like got canned or something. United States has already like basically said that this bill has like potentials to violate the United States trade agreement, like the USPCA, or I forget what it's called exactly, the acronym. It used to be called NAFTA, it's called something else now. A paragraph in that agreement that says that you can't favor any sort of digital content over like others based on nationality and stuff, which is, it's to me, it reads as a direct violation by implementing Bill C11 with the USPCA trade agreement. So I don't even understand how they're able to pass this bill without potentially violating huge agreements with the United States and Mexico. Like,
yeah.
So it's very messy, and I just feel like it's a colossal waste of time and energy, and I really don't know if it's going to affect other countries, but it probably will if it gets passed. I feel like they will follow suit.
It's not much better here in the States as far as inflation goes, things like that. It's with all of the nations suffering from, let's just call them losses after COVID. You would think that they would want to unite everybody and actually help everyone, you know, get some revenue to recover from that. But it seems more so that the legacy media that lost the revenue is the focus. Mm-hmm. And the little people are just like, oh, well, that's just something you have to deal with now. Then completely shoving it under the table. That disconnect.
Yeah, so Pablo Rodriguez, who's the guy who basically brought the bill to the government, he's like, well, we're out of this bill, the Canadians will recoup $1 billion of revenue from streaming services. And he kind of just pulled that number out of his ass because it seems to just grow by 100,000 like each time he says it. But he's excluding the fact that YouTubers themselves, just YouTube and just AdSense, have brought in like over $1 billion in 2021 alone. So that's just YouTube and AdSense, and it has nothing to do with like merchandise, which is in my case like 10 times fold. I basically bring in no revenue from ads. But like all the merchandise, like think of all the people I've had to pay in Canada, like manufacturing companies. I've had my vinyl records made in Canada. I've had my VHS tapes, my Blu-rays made in Canada, and I'm spending a lot of money getting those stuffs made. They all go to different jobs, and it's like they're treating YouTubers like we're not businesses, and like we're not also contributors to the GDP. And I don't know, there is no exact number out there right now because really there hasn't been many studies done on this, but whatever the legacy media is losing right now, I'm like certain that YouTubers are making up for in terms of GDP contributions, just based on the amount of either AdSense or merchandise sales or companies that they hire, even just employees. Linus Tech Tips is one of the biggest YouTube channels, and I think he has like a huge company. Like he's got tons of employees. They're all on salaries. We're companies too, and it's almost like, well, so what is it about CTV that's so important? Like just because they're failing, they feel like they need to retain their status, but they got to move on like everyone else.
I think a lot of it's jealousy. I mean, if you want to put it this way, I've said this before, and it's been taken the wrong way. It's trickle-down theory that works, is what online content is. Because like you said, you have your content, that's the main focus. You have all the people you've hired who make money, all the manufacturers you get to make your merchandise, things like that. Mm-hmm. The ads, the people from the ads, I mean, it's spreading into so many different directions. It's its own economy.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. We had so you know me for my animations and stuff, but I had a second channel before called StereoKroma, and we made documentaries on Canadian products that were made in Canada. So we did one on like a documentary on how a guitar is made by this luthier, Michael Greenfield in Montreal. He's kind of like this really well-known like guitar maker. There's this company Candy Labs, and those videos, like they all went viral and stuff. And they were able to sell their products like crazy just from the fact that we made little simple videos on them, The guitar video wasn't like simple though. I mean, that was like an hour-long documentary, but it's just, there's a lot of aspects to YouTube and stuff that promote the Canadian industry, and they're just really about to kind of clamp down on it. It's really a backwards move.
Like you were saying, with it being it's basically a more advanced ad for products out there for independent mom and pop shops, things like that. Mm-hmm. And the difference is what legacy media doesn't have, what they're the most jealous of, is not only is it an ad wrapped in a wrapper that is more palatable for the general audience, but has a soul behind it. They can't copy that.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, for those who are watching today and are interested in C11, how would they be able to help? Just the general viewer.
If most of your audience is American, there isn't really too much you can do. I mean, it's Canadian politics. The only thing I would say is try to spread the word as much as possible. If you see a video on Bill C11, try to give it a share or post about it, or raise awareness. That's really all you can really do at this point. The bill is like in the Senate, as I was saying before. I can't even do anything about it anymore. I've spoken twice, and so now I just kind of have to sit and wait and see what happens. Basically, just got to make your voice heard that you're not okay with this kind of stuff. You're not okay with the government telling you what percentage of recommendations you should be seeing. Honestly, YouTube gives you recommendations. People complain about that enough, but imagine the government is also trying to tell you what to watch. Like it's gonna be a huge mess. Right now we have the option to be like, okay, well, YouTube's not doing it for me, so I'm going to move on to TikTok, or I'll move on to Odyssey, I'll do whatever I want, But soon, in terms of Bill C11, all of those platforms are going to have to be regulated in terms of what they show you as an audience.
Comply or deny.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, thank you for going over the heavier topics with me first. I thought that was most important, so I really wanted to make that the highlight and the focus of this interview. But there's some fun things too. I was really curious about Hexsystem. Didn't really get to get into it last time. So I was curious, when did you start creating music, and what really sparked that interest?
So if I were to go back to the very beginning, this was like maybe like grade 4 or 5. We had like this computer class and this was like a long time ago, probably like 2002, 2000. I don't remember how old I was, like 13 or whatever. Basically, they had this program on the computer called Acid, and I think it was like a super early version of Fruity Loops.
Yeah.
And so I used to make like really like crappy kind of like electronic music, and then I stopped for a long time. I don't know, I didn't really, but I used to make music back then, and then I got into like other things, right? But then I went to art school back in 2008 to 2012, and I took one class called Sound for Film, and they taught us how to use Logic. And I was like, oh, wait a second, this Logic program is pretty cool. It's got all these like built-in synthesizers and that sort of thing. So I just got into making music again. Since art school and like starting my Umami animation channel, I would just make music here and there and just post it on my channel, which basically had 0 views. My music was like getting nowhere. It was like a dead flat line sort of thing. And my friend came over and told me to start animating one day. He showed me a bunch of channels, and I was like, well, okay, maybe I can like promote my music just by making some animations. And so that's why like the first 3 animations I made are just kind of like music videos, like the McDriven one and McFellin. They're all just kind of like tracks of the music that I made. And it sort of worked. Like, the people were catching on. They liked the videos, and then they eventually liked the music. It's hard to promote like music that doesn't have lyrics. It's like just purely electronic, like kind of a niche topic, honestly. Like if you were to say, like one of my main influences is Boards of Canada, they're pretty like well known within the electronic music world, but like as a general name out there, I don't think too many people would know who they are, or like Brian Eno, or like, or Aphex Twin. Aphex Twin's a little bit more popular, I think, so maybe more people know about him, but that's all like experimental kind of like electronic music with typically not usually any singing in it.
Well, going deeper into the conceptualization and inspiration behind the music itself, where do you pull the most inspiration from? Some people they'll go out in nature, they'll see things, they'll hear certain sounds and bring that into the music. Maybe it's based upon their feelings for love interest. Of course, music that doesn't have lyrics is usually a little bit more atmospheric and ambient, but where do you pull your inspiration from?
So when I was first starting out, a lot of times it would be like I heard something in the song that I thought was cool, but then like the song never really like emphasized it or like used it to an extent that it was good. So I would try to like emulate it, But then obviously in my efforts to emulate it, I could never do it perfectly, and it always sounded a little bit different. It was always just kind of like a starting point, and then eventually when I'm making the music, I'll change it, So for every like song that I release, I probably have like 100 songs that I just don't release because like I'm just constantly just making random sounds. Like sometimes if like I'm bored at night, I'm like, okay, I'll just open up Logic and just try to play the piano for a bit, right? And the weird thing is like 90% of the time it sounds like crap, and I'm just like, whatever, I'll just delete it, right? Yeah. But then there's like that 10% of the time where it's just like, it just comes out naturally, and it's like almost like it just works, and I just really have like minimal editing to do to the song to make it fixed, and then that's it. And so before I used to do a lot of like software instruments, but now because of the budget I get with interface and safe mode and stuff, if I have a song that I like and I want to hear it on piano, I'll just send it to an actual pianist, and then they will record it on their actual piano. And the benefits of that are I don't have to spend forever tweaking all the velocities of individual notes and making it sound real. And then I could spend like 2-3 days doing that. Or you could just hire someone to do it for you, and it does cost a little bit of money, but you save possibly upwards of a week, just from tweaking your sound, and then you have something that's real. So I've been doing that more often now, just getting session musicians to help. I use I just send them the composition, they record it back, and then I either mix it in with my synth or I let them mix it for me,
Do you ever compose music with lyrics though? You ever tried it?
I've never even tried it, and I figured like I kind of want to do it sometimes, and I don't know, like I've always found that like, especially if you're watching like an animation and then like the music starts having like singing in it, it starts sounding like Disney, especially if like the characters are singing. Yeah. I guess that's not true. I mean, like it depends if the character's singing or not. But anyway, I haven't done it, but it is something I want to try. I don't sing myself. I don't have this. I never tried. I don't have the. I'm probably not gonna. So if I were to do it, I would bring in someone who's been doing it experienced, because it's like me trying to play the violin, like I'm not gonna learn the violin from scratch. Like I've got too many other things I gotta do right now. So I'll hire someone that can do it for me,
Didn't really want to make this about interface or safe mode, but I do have one question about it. When making safe mode and interface, or either one, what comes first? The musical concept, and then does the story kind of follow that? Or does the story come first and then you write music for it?
So it used to be that I would just make the music first 100% of the time and just let the flow of the story go. And then now it's like 50-50. So I'm always thinking about the story ahead of time, but then I'll make music, and oftentimes I'll have like 3 or 4 songs that I'm working on at the same time. And if I feel like one of them's like more suitable for the episode, I'll probably work on that, push that in a certain direction. So it's a little bit of both. But right now I'm working on Safe Mode episode 5, and the music's like already done. So I'm sending it off to get recorded, and then I'm gonna just focus on the animation.
Well, I'm super excited for that. Like I said, safe mode, it's really heating up. It's very awesome. Just the last episode that I saw, it was one of those moments where I had to sit there and I'm just like, holy crap, this is awesome. It's sort of giving me the vibes. So it's definitely. Now, I don't like to compare it to interface because it's very different. I really like the whimsical aspect of it. It leans a little harder into that, but the way you do it, you don't just put something goofy on screen. You copy other works of art and bring those styles into it, which is really cool. But just with this last episode, it really felt like a true sequel to Interface, if that's fair to say. It really felt like it was back in that world, and it was really cool feeling.
It felt more like grounded to what Interface was. And I wanted to start off safe mode completely almost like
is it related, is it not?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like people are like watching it, it's like its own thing, because I don't want to be like making Interface part 2.
Exactly.
I want safe mode to be just as good on its own and have its own voice. But I feel like at this point now, you're gonna start feeling like this feels so familiar to Interface. Because it takes a while to establish characters. I know a lot of the comments sometimes I get are people are like, well, I don't understand what's going on here and stuff. But it's like, if you were to watch this as a movie, you got to understand, if you were to explain everything in the first 10 minutes or make direct connections to the interface within the first 3 episodes, it's just not going to be good.
Yeah, you're done.
Exactly. As a piece of film, it's not good. So as an individual animator, it takes forever for me to make these episodes out. I think around episode 4 and episode 5 and episode 6, we're going to start seeing some more serious connection to the interface. And but also it's just lighter too in terms of content. I mean, it's more comedy based. That's another thing. Interface got really heavy towards the end, and I feel like it was good for interface, but it necessarily wasn't something I wanted to keep doing forever, if you know what I mean.
If it doesn't have that conclusion to it, it's basically what happened to the show Lost. You start losing focus, it starts becoming other things, it gets so convoluted, they just scrap the ending and just say, everybody's dead. So you never want to put yourself in that position.
Exactly.
Well, I think the pace you've been going at is great, and I can't wait to see what's next. I'm super excited for safe mode. Like I was saying off camera earlier, well, technically on camera, off camera, but what I was saying earlier, I want to do something special for it, because this really felt like not really the beginning, but let's say the first part was kind of the introduction to the book, and now we're getting into the first chapter. So that's what it feels like to me, at least.
I feel like in order to have the funny parts of safe mode be as high as they can be, you also need to explore the kind of darker aspects of the world that they're living in, and stop denying the fact, there's going to be some questions answered, like why is there a military in the safe mode, or why is it that Smear even has to do this stuff? I thought it was supposed to be this perfect world afterlife sort of thing, You got to start answering those questions, and then you really, once you start thinking about why these things exist, it can get quite dark. And I think there's still going to be comedy elements, obviously, but it's going to start kind of delving into those subjects, and it will be like a tonal shift. Yeah, just you're gonna feel like it's gonna get
context.
Yeah, exactly. So it'll make those funnier aspects of safe mode funnier, because you're contrasting it with the dark humor or whatever that's to come. So
not really too off the wall theory is that maybe the reason that the interface is having problems is because a little mischief was introduced into it.
Well, yeah, exactly. As soon as you introduce a bit of chaos into the perfect world, you're gonna get all sorts of things happening. So
There's actually another video I'd like to make, kind of comparing Mischief to the story of Lucifer. I think it's a very interesting parallel there. Also, with the more ancient stories of Leviathan, the Canaanite legends, I think there's a lot of connections there that I should really get into. I think it'd be interesting. So
that would be fascinating, yeah, for sure.
I enjoy these interviews. You always have a lot of context to things. You always have a lot to say when it comes to your art, which shows how much you love it. And that's one of the things I appreciate most about you as an artist. And again, with C11, you having just shows how much you genuinely care for the art world. So thank you again for everything today.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Now I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my patrons and channel members. Thanks to you, I'm able to do what I love. CNK114, Investigator Zeus, Dobby's Music, Jera Mullins, Free Spirit Katie, MC Darfer, Vexus, Agnieszka, Granny Monster, Nightmare Luna, Archer, and Roxy. Really, thank you so much for everything you do. It means the world to me.